nearly all of the media focuses purely on whether the Bank of England should have raised interest rates by more, about the same, or done something different. But the thing that I believe that the media consistently misses is the anemic and lingering banking crisis. Banks have never been fully reformed since 2008, and the main reason for all this money printing is Japanese style since the 1990s to mask the deep insolvency of the banking system.
And then saying that, but also away from that, just on a personal level, a lot of people are going to struggle not just with those energy prices. I mean, my word, if they go up to over £4,000 per annum, that is going to be incredibly difficult. But also questions about what more the government can do to help.
Well, that is a very fair question indeed. When you look at the actual numbers produced back in 2011 by the IMF, that the banking crisis cost taxpayers in the UK 800 billion. I would imagine that the cost of QE year on year is hard to estimate, but it's certainly in the hundreds of billions year after year after year. And the purpose of all this is just to donate money to a fairly non-functioning banking system, because the key issue here that maybe your viewers tend to fail to appreciate, because it sounds a bit technical, is that a healthy banking system has always been evidenced by the presence of an interbank market. At the end of the day, some banks in credit, some banks are short of funds, and the banks would lend to each other without security, without any form of collateral. That seized up. That's why we had a banking failure in 2008 and 9, and it's never come back. Banks do lend to each other these days, but with collateral. And the central banks of Europe and the UK have moved from being the lenders of last resort to the lenders of first resort. And the situation will never heal. And now we're seeing the real problems through the generations. Unaffordable house prices, I think, are very closely linked to zero interest rates. House prices, as we capital markets practitioners would say, are fixed nature assets. So their price moves inversely to the direction of interest rates. Yeah. And as you see interest rates start to move up now, you'll find that, sadly, mortgage borrowers losing out twice. They'll lose out as the price of the house falls and also as their monthly mortgage payment rises. And
it is interesting, isn't it? As you said, those interest rates are going up in order. The Bank of England would obviously argue to tackle inflation, and we don't know where that might end, those interest rates rise. What do you make of this argument that the Bank of England didn't see this crisis coming? Even suggestions from, or hints, I should say, maybe not suggestions from Liz Truss, about questioning its independence.
It's very hard to argue that any central bank is truly independent from government. I think the statistics that I've recently seen is that the Central Bank of England, the Bank of England, owns about half of all public debt issued by the government. Now, you look at the European Central Bank, where I think the numbers are even greater. The central banking system of Europe, i.e. the European Central Bank and the national central banks of the 19 Eurozone countries, plus the other 4 non-Eurozone countries, I think they own something like 75 to 80% of all public debt in Euroland, and therefore I think the problems are probably going to come to the surface first in continental Europe. Nothing to do with Brexit than here in the UK.
And just from your personal perspective, just on a day-to-day basis, I mean, are you seeing, talking to friends and relatives, I mean, are you seeing people, starting to struggle, or at least people who are fearful that in the months ahead they may start to struggle with just not just the energy prices, but food prices and everything else? Well,
sure. The two main subjects are food and energy. And certainly energy, there has to be a powerful argument that the government has to consider doing something that maybe Mr Corbyn would have been lobbying for a few years ago when he was a contender, namely to kind of think about much greater subsidies than the £400 already announced to households struggling to choose between heating and eating. But when it comes to eating, there are some things that people can do about that. They can maybe grow their own fruit and vegetables and so forth.